Now, that was a pretty good guess. There's one French word that's the key to it. And everybody knows that French word. Do you know it? I'll write it on the board and you'll know it immediately. L'amour. L'amour, toujours l'amour. Now, this French word is taken from the Latin word. And the Latin word is amor. Love. Now, we are, in a certain sense, coining a new word. We're calling this telecast amorization. That is to say, making the world more and more lovable, making humanity more lovable. That's the point of it. Of course, it's a very broad subject because the word love can be used in so many different senses. For example, I love crepe Suzette. I love Paris in the spring. I love the Mets. I love Susie. So we have to form a kind of a hierarchy of loves. And so the amorization is in an ascending scale. And this is the way we're going to trace it, through 3 stages. Now, the first stage, which barely belongs in it, we're going to call the it love. And the next stage, we will call service love. That's much higher. And then the third stage, which is the highest, we're going to call gift love. So we'll trace the evolution of the amorization of humanity through these 3 stages. This chalk I have is kind of brittle. Tonight when I came to the studio, the angel had marked on it, handle, very fragile, handled with prayer. Now, the first is the it love. The it love is not a love for a person. It's only a love for the pleasure which a person gives. It's very much like a paper cup love. You drink the water and you throw away the cup. And in this kind of love, there is practically no concern whatever for the other person. One is concerned with taking a torch, throwing it into the walls of another city, and watching it burn. It's a love in which the ego, the self, is projected into another person. And what is loved, actually, is not the other person, but the ego that has been projected into that person. See, this is therefore a very selfish, egotistic kind of love, and hardly even merits the name of love at all. And it's a love that has, that sometimes seeks to justify itself. In fact, it always does. Simply because whenever we miss a high value and go into a lower one, we rationalize. And therefore, it's found to be very common among high school and college students to hear this kind of rationalization of an it love. A young man, for example, who has not in some way violated the person of a young woman will say of other young men, well, you're not a man. You haven't lived. See, he's setting up a new standard. Or in a girl's dormitory, one girl will say to another girl, what, you haven't lost your virginity? You're not modern. This is the rationalization. It is almost reaching a point that Nietzsche spoke about when he said, well, you go on doing wrong until you subvert all values. And then you can say, evil be thou my good. and good be thou my evil. And this kind of it love always destroys the person and does not equip it for true love. We find this brought out in one of the novels of Dostoevsky called The Raw Youth. Dostoevsky tells the story of a certain Vershilov who was in love with two women. One, Sonia, who was married, and the other was Katrina, who was engaged. The virtue and the beauty of these two women irritated him. He tried to kill Katrina. It's strange that after excesses of it love, we often see in the papers, after rape there will come a murder. It is thought that almost that one reconciles his crime simply by taking another life. So Vershilov tried to kill Katrina. And when he visited Sonia one day, he picked up an icon. And he looked at it. And he said, "You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to throw this on the floor. I'd like to smash it. Why is it I want to do that? I want to destroy things. I'm splitting myself." I heard the other day of a man who went to a funeral and whistled. That's what I'm doing. Whistling at funerals. And I think that if I took this icon and threw it on the floor, it would break in two pieces, just like myself. And he threw it on the floor and it broke into two pieces. The man that was split because he never had a real communion of love with another person. Now that kind of love we leave behind. And we come to another love, which is service love. Now, this is in marriage, but we're not going to talk about marriage, except just a few words. In all marriage and in all true love, there is such a respect for the person that the beloved is always on the pedestal and the lover is always on his knees. That's why the real prayer of love is, "I am not worthy. Domine non sum dignus." And where this kind of love exists, it continues to be even when there is no reciprocity of love. It's like drinking water now out of a very precious glass, even when there's no water in the glass. The glass has value. The person has value, even though it doesn't return it. But we're concerned with the amorization of humanity. And so in this service love, there is a going out to other people just simply because they are other people. One desires to serve them. I suppose the best description of this kind of love was what was found at a dinner. It was called a Last Supper. And the host rose from the table, took off an outer robe, girded himself with a towel, then got down on his knees and wiped the feet and washed the feet of 12 men. It was a symbol of this divine host who took off the robe of his glory and pomp and girded himself with the humanity of a suffering slave doing dirty work. like washing dirty feet. And then he said to them, you call me Lord, you call me Master. So I am. And if I, your Lord and Master, do that, then you wash one another's feet. And this became the foundation of service. Now this is a love that is growing in the world. And it takes us out of the realm of liking. Believe me, there's a great difference between liking and loving. Liking is in the emotions, it's in the feelings, it's in the glands. It's something over which we do not have very much control, like the rumbling of a stomach. There are certain things we don't like instinctively. I told you already what I don't like in the way of food. I'll not repeat it now because I just make the announcement once a year. And then there are certain people that we do not like instinctively. But I say, because liking is in the emotions, we cannot very well control it. But love, that's in the will. That is subject to our command. That is why the golden rule is not like your neighbor, but love your neighbor. That we have control over. The little boy is told by his mother to eat spinach. He doesn't like spinach. I know one mother who said to her little boy, I know 1 million boys in the United States that would love that spinach. He said, name 3. Now, we may point out all of the defects of our civilization. And we read about the failures of our society. Because remember that the press always carries the breaking of the commandments, not the keeping of the commandments. So we get the bad side. But there is a tremendous amoralization of humanity going on at the present time. Take any defect of the UN that you please. What is behind it? Amorization of nations. At least they're trying to settle disputes in a peaceful way. Foreign aid, all right, it's wasted. It should be distributed by people who are on the scene. But at any rate, it's service, it's love of humanity. Psychiatrists, doctors, social workers, teachers, those who are defending civil rights, those who are helping the downtrodden, volunteer workers in hospitals, missionaries. All of these people are carrying a message of love throughout the world. And we're apt to forget that this love of theirs is perhaps saving the world. You say, well, it's not religious, it's not divine. Maybe it is not. Yet, when our blessed Lord washed the feet of the disciples, Peter said, no, not my feet. And our Lord said, if I do not, you will not have any part with me. And then Peter said, then wash my hands, my feet, my head, everything. Our Lord said, you do not understand now, but you will understand later on. You'll understand later on. And so, even the communists, who every now and then do something for their neighbor, the Buddhists, the Muslims, everyone in the world who is engaged in any kind of service out of love for neighbor, whether they like the neighbor or not, they may not yet know what they're doing, but they will know later. It's like the sun. How many people know how distant the sun is from the earth? How many tons of energy does it burn a day in atomic fission to light and heat this world? They do not know all of its secrets. But who is there that does not live by its light and by its heat? And so someday all of these will eventually come to the knowledge of the higher love, the gift love. Then they'll begin to see that this service love that they had for their neighbor is something that had its roots in the divine. They have sparks. Somewhere there had to be a flame. All their love is the segment of a circle. Someday they'll have the circle. And that was why the Greeks, who used this word for love, eros, finally became degenerated into a carnal, sensual love. And when true love came into the world, this gift love, greater love than this no man hath, Christianity had to find a new word for it. Agape. Another kind of love. Why, this word is used only 10 times in the greatest of all the Greek poets, Homer. It's only used 3 times in one of the great comedies or dramas of Euripides. But in the New Testament, it's used 320 times. See, it's something new. And so be hopeful about the world. It's being amorized in the right kind of way, despite all of our failings. I can summarize it all by telling you of an incident that happened to me. It was during my student days at the University of Louvain in Belgium. I went down to Paris to preach, and I stopped at a small hotel near the Opera Comique of Paris. And there was an Englishman playing a piano in a small salon. And I listened to him for a while and complimented him. And then after, I said, would you like to come and take dinner with me? He said, all right. So we went to a little restaurant near the hotel. He told me that he was a salesman in one of the best known and most reputable jewelry stores in Paris. During the course of the dinner, he said, I have a problem. He said, do you know that I've never met in my life one good man or one good woman? Never. So I thanked him for the compliment. And then he went on to say, I meet a woman and then I get tired of them. He said, just a year ago, this coming 11th of February, he said, I was in this restaurant. Over there at that table was a woman who was trying to break a lump of sugar into a cup of coffee. She couldn't break it. I went over and helped her, and she told me how mean her husband was to her. So I said, well, come and live with me. Here's the it love. So he said, she's been with me ever since. I'm tired of her. So this morning, I bundled up all of her clothes, left them with the concierge, but she anticipated my move. And she left me this note. Read it. And it read, Dear Puppy. See, it was the it love. It was a sad love. It's a puppy love has got a face like a basset hound. And so it read, Dear Puppy, if you do not continue to live with me until the 11th of February, I shall commit suicide by throwing myself into the Seine. Now, he said, may I allow her to continue living with me until the 11th of February to prevent her from committing suicide? And I said, no. May not do evil that good may come from it, and she will not commit suicide anyway. Well, about 11 o'clock, I said, I have to go up to Montmartre. Oh, he said, I was just beginning to think you were all right. Now I know you're as bad as any of them. Why are you going up to that hellhole? I said, my good man, there's something else at Montmartre besides dives. So there's a great basilica up there called the Sacré-Cœur. And I said, there'll be 1,000 men up there. All night long. They're up there every night. And I'm going up there. Spend the whole night. Come up with me. What'll I do? Anything you please. How long will I stay? I said, I intend to stay all night, but I'll leave whenever you leave. So he stayed all night. I read Mass there the next morning. And he said, stay in Paris a couple of days and teach me how to be good. Just discovered what love is. And that night, at our appointed time, he came in with a woman, not the one that was involved, and he said, we'll go out to dinner. And I said, no, not all of us. I said, either you're going with me or you're going with her. Choose. So he walked up and down a few times and said, well, Father, I think that I'll go out with her. And so he who arose from it love to a kind of a service love now fell back. But 2 years later, I went to visit Abbé Pierre, the man who takes care of all of the rag pickers of Paris. And as the truck drove up, who was on it but my good friend? And he said, I'm working here now for Abbé Pierre. He said, I have decided to go out with Agape.
Bishop Sheen will return in a moment.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs and ministered in many parts of the world to people of every belief. As he said many times, it is not a unity of religion we plead for, but a unity of religious people. We may not be able to meet in the same pew, but we can meet on our knees.
There are two kinds of knowledge about things. In order to love human things, we first have to know them. But as regards agape, of which I spoke tonight, and divine things, one first has to love them, and then one comes to know them. I said to him, don't you think we ought to think about getting married? And he said, at our age, who'd be having either of us? And now some true stories about proposal, brief ones. And this little girl, when she was a young woman, when she was proposed to, was asked by the young man, what kind of an engagement ring would you like? And she whipped out of her purse a picture of a ring that she had cut out of a paper 10 years before. There's nothing like being prepared. And then this other young lady had been waiting for a year or two for a proposal, and she was absolutely sure that on Christmas Eve he would bring a ring and propose. So she was watching him very carefully as he came in, and he had a great big box, a fine box of chocolates, which he gave her. Well, she was so mad. When she saw those chocolates, she chucked them all into the fire, ring and all. They're not married to this day. There are various ways of making a proposal, and the way one proposes depends upon how one loves, and there are three ways of loving. The Christian way, the romantic way, and the scientific way. The Christian way is based upon the fact that the other person is a gift of God and is a person. The person is composed of body and soul. The body is the source of allurement, the soul is the source of content and consent, and both of them go to make up that which is most precious in this world, namely personality. And in the face of a blessing, such as the other person, one feels a sense of unworthiness. And that is one of the reasons why, in proposing, one regards the other person as a gift, the other person regards the one proposing as a gift, and both think of themselves as gifts of God that are under some expression of the will of God in a relationship one to the other. And because of that humility, that is why a proposal of that kind is often made on the knees. Because the beloved is always on the pedestal. The lover is always on his knees. He does not deserve that blessing. Every communion has that sense of unworthiness, even though it be the soul with the divine master, or person with person. The cry is, "Oh, Lord, I am not worthy." And in the engagement, man is willing to surrender his freedom out of love. Of course, the girl may say when he proposes, "Now I listen. You say you love me. You say that you love me above every other girl in the world. Do you realize that there are 683,412 eligible young women in this city? Have you tried all of them before you came to me? How do I know that you love me more than you love them?" Well, if he's a good metaphysician, which he probably isn't, but if he is, he will say, listen, every act of love is not only an affirmation. Every act of love is also a negation. And the mere fact that I choose you, I reject everyone else in all the world. And that is true of real love. Now, of course, when a man makes the proposal and becomes engaged, he goes through all sorts of fantastic actions. Some have been very well described by Chesterton. When G.K. Chesterton became engaged to Frances Blogg on a bridge in St. James's Park, London, he felt it was necessary, after she had accepted him, to go home and tell Frances Blogg's mother he had proposed. And Gilbert Chesterton was very nervous. Didn't know exactly how to tell the mother, and the mother perceived that Gilbert was very nervous. She had just finished papering the house. And so she thought, well, maybe she could calm Chesterton a bit by saying, Gilbert, what do you think of the wallpaper? So Chesterton was at art school. He had a great big black crayon in his pocket. And he immediately stood up like a great knight, went to the wallpaper, and drew on the side of the wall a great portrait of Frances, his beloved. And when he proposed to her, he wrote something like this. It was a beautiful expression of a Christian engagement. There are 4 lamps of thanksgiving always before me. The first is for my creation out of the same earth with such a woman as you. The second is that I have not, with all my faults, gone after strange women. You cannot think how a man's self-restraint is rewarded in this. The third is that I have tried to love everything alive, a dim preparation for loving you. And the fourth is, but no words can express that. Here ends my previous existence. Take it. It led me to you. Young men who are like to have copies of Chesterton's proposal may write to me. Then there's another kind of love, which is the romantic love, in which love is divorced from the divine will and from a religious basis. One is not so much interested in the other person. Therefore, one does not have that sense of unworthiness in the face of a gift of God. Rather, one is interested in the other person because of the pleasure the other person gives me. That's romantic love. In other words, the ego, or the self, is projected into someone else. And then it is made to appear that the other person is loved. And all that is loved is the ego in the other person. Hence the German poet Goethe, when he was 74 years of age, proposed to a girl 17 in such romantic, gushy, sentimental language that when it was all over, she didn't know it was her proposal. And Goethe's Faust was not interested in creating love in someone else, expressing reverence. He was only interested in seeing love created in himself. Don Juan the same. Don Juan needed another person in order to beget this experience within himself. But he was without any reverence for a person outside. Stendhal wrote on love at the beginning of the last century. Gave an expression of romantic love that ought to make young women beware. He said that love is like crystallization. He said that in the salt mines of Salzburg, a strange phenomenon takes place. If one cuts the leaves off a limb of a tree and puts the limb down into the salt mine of Salzburg, after several weeks, that limb will come out as if it were glittering with diamonds. Stendhal said that is what you have to do in love. You have to crystallize the other person. Endow the person with qualities in your proposal, which the other person really does not have. Well, that kind of romantic love very often ends in something actually that is very unromantic. And perhaps one of the best expressions of that kind of proposal of romantic love, where it is always, remember, the self that is the principal interest, was well expressed in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. That great classic of English literature, you remember, contains the proposal of a clergyman by the name of Mr. Collins to Elizabeth Bennet. Mr. Collins is not on his knees, but he proposes in the romantic fashion. Notice the importance of the I, not the importance of the lady. My reasons for marrying you are, incidentally, it's the man who always gives the reasons. I love you because you're beautiful, or because you're this, or because you're that. The woman never gives a reason. She loves. That's the reason. So Mr. Collins gives reasons. My reasons for marrying you are, first, that I think it is the right thing to do for every clergyman in easy circumstances like myself to set an example of matrimony in the parish. And secondly, that I am convinced it will add very greatly to my happiness. And thirdly, which perhaps I ought to have mentioned earlier, that it is the particular advice and recommendation of a very noble lady whom I have the honor of calling patroness. It was but last Saturday night that she said, "Mr. Collins, you must marry. A clergyman like you must marry. Choose properly, choose a gentlewoman for my sake and for your own." It remains to be told why my views were directed to you instead of to my own neighborhood, where I assure you there are many available young women. And now nothing remains for me but to assure you in the most animated language of the violence of my affection. I'm sure nobody will want this proposal. Well, Elizabeth Bennet, of course, refused Mr. Collins, and he said that you must give me leave to flatter myself that your refusal of my addresses are mere words. I shall therefore interpret your refusal to your wish of increasing my love by suspense, according to the usual practice of elegant females. In the romantic, too, one might associate the utilitarian. And we'll pass that over very quickly. That's marrying someone for money. And great money sometimes was asked if you married the most beautiful daughter in the family, and then you were paid a great deal of money if you married the ugliest. Sir Thomas More, the English chancellor and martyr and saint, married the ugliest daughter in a family just to please the family. He happened to be an excellent gentleman and turned out all right, though she tried to convince him that he should not go to the stake and be martyred for his faith. And then, of course, there is the American businessman that I heard of when the young man proposed to his daughter. He said, "Leave your name, address, telephone number. If nothing better turns up, I'll phone you." Well, the young man finally married her, and as they came out of the church, the father said to the groom, "I want you to know, young man, that you're the second happiest man in the world." Well, that utilitarian love we can ignore because there's only one kind of love that can be bought. That's a puppy's. Now, in addition to the Christian, and in addition to the romantic and the purely utilitarian, there is the scientific, which is the very modern way of making love. And you'd be surprised how very common this is. As its inspiration in Freud, Sartre, and Marx. Take, for example, love under Marx and communism. The only important thing in all the world, according to Marx, is economic production. And marriage was to sustain private property. It was built upon it, rather. Private property goes, marriage is no longer needed. When communism began in Russia, though they found out socially and experimentally this plan did not work, but when it began, the communist theory was drink the water, forget the glass. In other words, the person does not matter. The person now completely dissolves and fades away. The Christian person now is not always even the pleasure. And communism has insisted that party leaders in various countries should take the wives that Moscow dictates. And you'd be surprised how often that happens. And then there's also the Freudian, where love is reduced to sex. See, what Freud has done is to interpret the person in terms of sex instead of understanding sex in terms of the person. Well, obviously, all human relations are going to be upset on that principle. So that a proposal Freudian character might run something like this.